So, hello and welcome to this month's episode of the Edtech Show. This evening, you've got me hosting, you've got Ollie Lewis, and we've got Ronan McNichol. And we've got some fantastic reports to share with you across the show this evening, sponsored this month by EZ Robots. And you'll be hearing more about them and their robotics in the classroom projects later on in Ronan's reports. Been a fantastic month. We're still recovering from BETT. Was it really that long ago? I've got a report on BETT 22. Delighted to have the opportunity to interview the portfolio director for BETT at Hive, Eve Harper. We've got other perspectives from Al Kingsley, author of Secret EdTech Diary, CEO of NetSupport and chair of 2 multi-academy trusts. And Caroline Keep, someone who's a regular fixture at the BETT event as well, both as an attendee and as a speaker. So looking forward to hearing their perspectives in my report later on in the show. And then wrapping things up later on, we have a fantastic report from Ollie, looking at what it is to be a network manager in education. We've got some fantastic insights in his segment as well from Dave Leonard. We've also got Gary Henderson and Z Mirza representing in his report as well. So really excited for those. So a big welcome to you to the EdTech Show this evening. And if you're watching live, please do say hello in the live chat. It's always fantastic to hear from the audience. In a Cilla Black kind of world, you know, what's your name, where'd you come from, love? So please do say hello. We'd love to hear from you. If you're watching back post live show, then please do in the alternative drop us a little line in the comments below. Let us know what you liked about the show, any suggestions you might have for future episodes, those kind of things. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And already we've got Rick Cowell joining us. Rick, one of the founders of the ANME. Try and get my words in right there. Hope you're feeling better, Rick. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. So our first segment, first report on the show this evening comes from Ronan McNichol, my co-founder in Global EdTech, and he had a chance to talk with the team at EZ Robot. But I'm not going to introduce his report completely. I'm going to bring Ronan into the studio and welcome him so that he can explain in a bit more detail about his section on the show. Over to you, Ronan.
Brilliant stuff, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, really enjoyed working on this segment. It really was a chance to explore not just the techie aspects of why robotics is important and the impact it will have, but also the whole literacy and conversation around it. So in this segment, I interviewed Dennis Cambates, the CEO of EZ Robot. Lovely guy, and we had a really good chat exploring everything about how we can inspire the next generation in robotics, and also Deanna Kuhn, the principal of Rio Vista Elementary School in the States. And we also had a student join us, Jasyra, as well as a humanoid life-sized robot, Jacksbot. So without any further explanation, enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks, Ronan. I appreciate that. Ronan, I've been in robotics and working with educators for about 8 years now. And being the CEO of a robotics company puts me in a position to have great access to what's happening in the industry, in the robotics industry and in AI worldwide in the workplace. And so when we teach robotics and when I'm working with educators, we try to help them have a good understanding of how these two technologies are transforming the workplace. And with that said, there's a few things I think that are really important for educators to understand. I think there's a bit of a misconception right now where a lot of educators are kind of viewing robotics and AI as two discrete industries, you know, and they are, but they're also, much like computers, going to be a layer across all industries. And what that really means is robotics and AI will transform transportation, retail, hospitality, agriculture, manufacturing, you know, engineering, medicine, accounting. They're going to change basically all industries. And what this means is, because these technologies are going to impact all industries, it's really important that all of our kids get a literacy in this technology. Now, I'm not talking about everybody becoming a roboticist or a programmer, to a very high level. So that's an important distinction. But I am a huge proponent that we all need this literacy. The forecasts are that robotics and AI will eliminate 20 to 47% of all jobs over the next decade. That's hundreds of millions of jobs globally. Now, we'll have hundreds of millions of new jobs coming, but those jobs will be high tech. So it's important that we get these skills to our kids. It's also important to understand that hundreds of millions of other jobs will transform from low tech to high tech. Jobs we wouldn't expect, like teaching and fashion design. So really, these technologies will change all industries, so all kids need this education and this literacy. And in saying that, I've spoken with 20,000 educators in the last 8 years. If we do a check-in on how we're doing globally in that arena, what we find is that at the high school level, so we're talking about 15 to 18-year-olds, average levels of engagement for boys is 3%. Average level of engagement for girls is 0.3%. So think about this. We've got an absolute paradigm shift happening in the workplace where everybody with this literacy is going to be significantly advantaged. People without this literacy, are going to be disadvantaged. But only 3 girls out of 1,000 and 30 boys out of 1,000 are getting this education. Some countries are doing better. Some school districts or counties are doing better. But really, we need to start bringing this literacy to everybody. And at the middle school level, average level of engagement is currently about 5 to 15%. And again, we need to raise that level up. Now, I've demonstrated robotics to more than 18,000 kids, and with this guy here, our humanoid. And when I do that, I find that we can get massively increased engagement. At the middle school level, we go from 5 to 15% is what schools typically see. We'll hit 90%. So 90% is a real solution when we talk about the changes that are coming. At the high school level, everybody else is getting 3% of boys, 0.3% of girls. We get 25 to 45% of boys and girls. We're hitting the high achievers, the students that are academically not performing as well, the athletes, the gifted and talented kids, the at-risk kids, students that are on the spectrum. We're really able to hit everybody with robotics. It's a fantastic, fantastic STEM education because it combines, programming, physics, math, and we get into the arts when we're teaching robotics as well. So we're really able to bring it all together in a beautiful package that really raises the kids' level of understanding of technical education.
I'm Diana Kuhn. I'm principal at Rio Vista Elementary School in the Amphitheater School District in Tucson, Arizona. And this is one of our students on our robotics team, Jasyra. She's a 5th grader. She's 11. And they have built a life-size InMove robot using a lot of the easy robot parts. And we also have some other easy robots you can see there in the background. She'll do a demonstration for you in a little bit. Well, we know that robotics are here now and they're in the future for our kids. In our school district, we've created what we call a portrait of a graduate based on what companies are saying they need from our kids when they graduate from high school. And when you teach robotics, you work a lot with logical sequencing, just putting the robot together and programming the robot. And there's collaboration between the team members. There's a lot of creative thinking about what they want to program the robot to do. They're communicating with each other, and obviously they're communicating in other ways outside of school too. It involves problem solving. They're using math skills and reading skills and writing skills. So it's really a good way for them to apply the things that they learn in the classroom to doing something like building and programming a robot.
Thanks, Ronan. So, an interesting thing happens for me when I'm talking in schools about robotics. I've gone into schools where I'm talking to a group of grade 9 girls at an all-girls school, and I can walk into the class and I can see the girls by the body language, they're not that interested in robotics. And so I start off with a question. I'm like, okay, let's get this out of the way. Who here thinks robotics is gross? And, there's a lot of giggling and stuff. And then eventually I get, 90% of hands going in the air. But an interesting thing is I'll say to the kids, like, you'll notice my hand is up because I've been doing this for 8 years. But if you had talked to me 9 years ago, I would have told you that I think robotics is gross, right? So what's happening is students and educators have a view of what robotics is, and it's not necessarily the right view of how we can teach robotics today. Certainly when we use the little humanoid here, we have all the engineering in here. It's a very powerful, powerful platform, but it looks cute and fun. And so what ends up happening is students build an emotional relationship or get very engaged with the robot to the point where they name the robot, they're talking to it. And then the students are like, I wonder if I can get, Swagbot to do this. I wonder if I can get Swagbot to do that. So the kids start getting excited about making their robot more, more powerful. The same way when students or children are working with or playing with Minecraft, they want to make their world better. The same thing happens when we have an inspiring robotics platform. The students want to make their robots cooler and neater. And, a great example would also be, I was in a school in the UAE, and we were doing a presentation to the robotics club. They had about 4 students show up that day, so not great attendance for the size of the school. And my associate said to the vice principal, can you bring some more students in that aren't interested in robotics? So they went out, rounded up 5 6th graders. They all came in, and they were out doing other activities and stuff, so they weren't super excited about being in a robotics presentation. And this was after school, kind of their time, playtime. And at the beginning of the presentation, these 5 students weren't very excited. An hour later, the vice principal said, okay, it's 4 o'clock. Your parents are here. We got to go. And the students said, 1 second, can we go get our iPads from our lockers? We want to take some videos of this robot. And what the girl said was, and this is a very typical comment we get, she said, I used to be afraid of robots and now I'm not anymore. And that's such an important thing that we have to understand. The truth of the matter is that most people think that, like most students and truly adults, think that robotics is not appealing for them. And so the first thing we have to do is we really need to work on that inspiration, get them excited about working with the technology. Then once we've got that, we can get their confidence built up and get them some real valuable STEM education. But if we don't inspire them, it's really hard to get that education, especially into the kids that already are coming in with a preconceived notion that they can't do robotics or they think that it's gross.
Jacksbot, wake up.
I am awake. Let me stretch a little. I have been standing all day. I am excited to be in a new place.
Jacksbot, wave right.
Hello, humans. My name is Jacksbot. I was created by Jaden, Jensira, Julio, Atticus, Cassie, Cora, and Siler.
All right. Well, several years ago, we started with the Make Block MBots. And they're pretty easy to use with either Scratch or Blockly. As students got interested in those, then they started wanting to have more humanoids or lifelike robots. So in kindergarten now, we're using some things that we get from learning resources. There are little mice or dogs or dinosaurs that they can program using directional commands. Then when they get into first grade and second grade, they can use the MBOTs. Mostly they're using like the joystick and some of the built-in commands that are in the MakeBlock program. Then as they become more familiar with those things, as they get into late second grade and third grade, they're starting to get into Hour of Code. And then they're able to use the block software to program the MBOTs to do different things. There's actually, they have a program where they can go through different lessons that start out with simple commands and get more complicated as they go along. But in our Makers Club, in our maker space, like I said, the kids started wanting some more humanoid robots. So the first one we found was JD.
So JD can do the split to handstand, and he has a camera on his forehead. His eyes can turn different colors, and he can dance and sing.
And from Easy Robot, and the kids started with just building a JD, and they did that pretty easily. I think Josiah, it took you maybe an hour at the most to build a JD. And there's some built-in things that JD is already programmed to do, and they can use the ARC software to execute those things. But as they've learned to use the ARC software, then they've also learned to program JD to do different things besides that, building frames and building them into actions using the Blockly. So we started there. And then when we were on the Easy Robot site, we were looking at one of the lessons, and we saw one of these life-size InMove robots in the background. And we thought, hey, let's try and do that. Since they can build JD so easily and program him, then let's go bigger. So we found the website about the InMove robots and wanted to do our own. But we modified the instructions that we found to use the EasyB controllers and some of the servos and the tiny IO servos that we got from them to build this life-size robot that we've named Jacksbot. Jacksbot is he's named after the first initials of all the kids that are on the robotics team, and then the bot because he's a robot. And they finished, well, we did all the 3D printing for him last year, and then they actually finished building him about mid-February this year, and have already programmed him with the ARC software to do all kinds of actions that they creatively thought of. So that's where we are now.
So thank you so much for that fantastic video there, Ronan. That was so good. And seeing the student presenting like that as well. I mean, my youngest is 11, and as you know, he likes to consider himself a bit of a YouTuber and all of that. But that was just fantastic. It must have been so thrilling to sort of be there and record that and see that taking place sort of in person.
Yeah, it was really fun, really really interesting. And Jasaira, the student in the video, she was lovely.
Cool. Well, look, it's time for your news update then, Ronan. So I'll hand over to you for your news. Over to you.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, this is my piece of news for this month. It was a Polish edtech company, Learnetic, who approached me regarding some materials resources that they had created for free for refugees, Ukrainian refugees. And I thought it was a really lovely thing that this company has done. They've basically created and published free digital textbooks, maths, phrase books in Polish and Ukrainian, primarily aimed at Ukrainian refugees in Poland, obviously. But the resources are all available for free, and the link at the bottom is an article that we've published, which contains all the various links to those resources. As much as anything, I just thought it was a really nice endeavor, and I thought it'd be really nice to help spread the word for them. Right, so Mark, do you want to come back on? And then I think we'll be moving on to the next segment, no doubt.
That's right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Ronan. Cheers. So I had the real pleasure of attending BETT a few weeks ago. It was an absolutely brilliant event. Personally, like many, a bit nervous, on the Tuesday before it started on the Wednesday. Would people turn up? Would there be problems related to COVID and all these different things? But as it turns out, it was an absolutely superb event. But don't just take it from me. I'm really grateful to Eve Harper and Al Kingsley and Caroline Keep for sharing their feedback about the event in this report, highlighting some of the best bits of BETT 22.
I think the first day of BETT, as we were waiting for the first guests to arrive, there was always a sense of anticipation, certainly excitement, and a little bit of nervousness about how the show was going to be supported and attended. And naturally, within a few hours, we very much moved into a positive frame of mind. Lots of familiar faces and plenty of new ones came through the door. And BETT very much felt reinvigorated and back just as big as ever.
We were so incredibly pleased with how the show went. It was a monumental effort by not only the team here, obviously, but all of our exhibitors and sponsors and the educators who really made the show what it was ultimately. And over the 3 days, we saw just over 22,500 visits from 104 countries, which it was incredible. I think we were just so, delighted to have that many people, particularly given we know that, schools are under a lot of pressure still, and it's still a challenging situation out there. So for that many to make it down from all around the world where COVID restrictions are completely different, country to country, we were thrilled, to be honest. As I say, it was nerve-wracking, but it was really amazing to see that many educators and institution leaders making it down, and really kind of shows how valuable the platform is, really.
I mean, one of the biggest highlights is being able to see and meet and catch up with the educators. I think that's one of the top highlights. But also, I'd say one of the really great things about BETT, I think, is having this moment where you can go and really play and look at all the technology that's on offer and see some of the new stuff that's out there. That's always deeply exciting to do that. So as you know, I got to have a good play with a whole bunch of tech this time. And also the talks, you can see some amazing talks at BETT, especially on the pedagogy. So that is a really like a pro benefit to do it. And also we get a chance to just socialize. You know, it's the get together, isn't it? You know, for the big education get together in the UK. You know, that's the one you want to be at.
I think with so many different EdTech events around the world, you always look for those similarities, but also the things that make shows stand out. And for me, BETT is different. I think it's the blend between the mix of the pedagogical content, the CPD that's provided, alongside that kind of equal measure of EdTech and technology, vendors, and learning around that space. And for me, it's finding that happy medium. And we always recognize that the strength of our sector is that co-production. So BETT really kind of emphasizes that vendors and professionals within the education space working together, collaborating and supporting each other.
I think, again, a lot of that comes down to what makes up the show. Certainly, like our exhibitors, our sponsors, our partners, our speakers. It's a huge network effect, like, and that's that's what we're a platform for. So I think by virtue of what they did at the show, and particularly I think the way everyone has risen to the challenge of the last 2 years to support schools, to support learners. There's so much to see. There's such a huge amount of innovation. And I think that ultimately is what brought people to the show under what were really challenging circumstances and from all over the world as well. So I think ultimately, there's been phenomenal fast-paced change in EdTech. It was changing at a pace anyway. I think it's really kind of the last 2 years, we've really seen that acceleration. And it was such an important time for people to come and kind of get together in person to share what they've learned, to kind of share opportunities, to discover that innovation as well. So I really think it's sort of all of those things. Like we're proud to work and have a brand like BETT that does have that global footprint. But ultimately, I think it's what the industry has done the last 2 years and that makes it so exciting and want people to come together and reunite, which I think it's a real cliche to say now, but we know it really holds true that nothing replaces being in person. So, that I think all of those things combined are really what made it what it was.
I had a good play, as you can see if you check out my Twitter, with Now Press Play, which was awesome. Actually, I really love that project. And so some really good plays with some of the kind of tech that's there. There was interesting AI projects in there this year that I have my eye on, because obviously being data sciencey, techie, I wanted to have a look at that. But then also just catching up and seeing what's new among some of the long-standing projects that I know and love, to see the people at Contronics, how they're doing robotics these days, and check out the Microbit crew, see what Microsoft are doing with the kind of hacking STEM stuff. It's always incredible.
I've got lots of highlights. One thing I think people will know with me is that I try to be a supporter of the community. So I tend to try and avoid to pick favorites in one regard, but there were plenty that I could pick. I think if I look at my own personal highlights, not only was it positive about the level of attendance and support of the event, I was fortunate enough to be asked to speak on a panel on the leaders stage, talking about how we take our lessons learned from our digital experiences and move those forward. And again, that was a real positive just by the number of people that were involved and wanted to engage in the conversation. I also think the Learn It stream that ran in parallel to BETT was a real success. There was significant engagement, lots of people wanting to take those kind of lessons learned. And also it was nice to see that experiences internationally were being brought into the conversation from all around the world. And I think that adds an extra dimension. If I take the broader, what really stood out for me at BETT, well, maybe I'm slightly biased, but I think the role of many of the UK EdTech vendors as part of that umbrella under BESA was a real positive. There's a real community vibe about supporting lots of us in the sector, and some have had a real rocky ride over the last couple of years. And at the same time, what was also nice, something that I'm always very passionate about, was seeing the new innovation. I like BETT Futures. I'd like BETT Futures to be much bigger in many ways, but I think it's always nice to see some of the innovation that has been created and evolved over the last couple of years. So the community aligns very much for me with what we've been trying to do at Net Support, that taking our product set that's very mature and well established, and really taking lessons learned and flipping and creating something completely different, but totally appropriate for now. And seeing other vendors do that, I think is really, a real positive sign, Mark.
When I was on the GEC panel, that one I did particularly like. Normally, I'll highlight that one, even though I was on one of their panels, for the simple reason that the panels itself lasted several, it spanned a whole chunk of time. And actually, there was some incredible, just mind-blowing talks on there about diversity and inclusion. It was just, really just incredible conversations on there. So, and obviously me being autistic and ADHD, it kind of rings home these days.
We had over 100 new companies exhibiting this year, 40, as you mentioned, as part of BETT Futures. And we also had sort of, going back to the international piece, brand new country pavilions. So this time we had our first German pavilion that we've had at the show, and showcasing German edtechs and startups, which is, again, really great to kind of, because we haven't seen many from that part of the world before, but also some incredible innovation from our returning exhibitors. I mean, again, too many to mention. And you talked a bit at the beginning about Net Support and how, what they do themselves, but who they hosted as well on their stand, which was just incredible to see. But yeah, just how everyone's risen to the challenge and what they've done in the past 2 years, and to have that being showcased. That's a real cop-out answer there for you, Mark, but that's my honest answer, so I hope that's okay. Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that we look at how we can improve each year, because that's kind of, I guess, the heart of innovation ultimately with these incredible startups that are coming through. I think it does really depend what stage they're at and what they're looking to achieve. So yes, you did mention BETT Futures. Obviously, that's sort of a pod offering where we try to take the hassle out of, for many, their first exhibition, and make that sort of a plug and play exhibition opportunity. But we reintroduced, as I'm sure you saw this year, our BETT Futures stage, which really gives that platform for startups not only to be there on there themselves, which is in itself valuable, whether they're pitching as part of a Shark Tank session, but we also ran lots of sort of clinic type content and brought lots of networks into the picture this year to kind of offer that support for startups, to help them find, because we know how important the networking piece is for them, to find those other contacts and organizations that exist to provide support. So for us, that was a really big part of reintroducing the BETT Future stage and what that offered.
What we've learned is the definition of the school, the classroom, the multi-academy trust. Frankly, the boundaries have now extended to be all-encompassing with the student at home, and on occasions the teacher at home. And we want to take the skills we've acquired and use them productively moving forward where appropriate. So for Net Support, what that meant was take the best things that we know about classroom instructional technology, take the best things that we know about online safety, take the best things we know about IT management that makes it easier to ensure those devices are all ready to go, and create a whole new solution, Classroom.cloud, which brings those key skills together in one simple and easy to use solution. It supports all the platforms, and it doesn't matter where the teacher or the students are. So hopefully it's a great tool for just in the classroom for engaging and supporting your learners. But equally, if some of your students aren't in the classroom, or the teacher can't get into the classroom, and we have other breaks in our learning, or maybe over the holidays, Classroom Cloud means you don't need to learn multiple products. Single solution does it all.
know, I've seen, and you can see it now, you know, you can't attend everything all the time, and there's lots of things that you do want to attend. You know, you see it with things like, you know, the research ed movement, and you see it with things like, you know, lots of the other kind of educational conferences that you can do. And a lot of them these days have gone to recording the content and then charging kind of a small nominal amount for ticketing for that. And I think that's okay. You know, I think, you know, people who present, you know, a BETT, you know, I think can get their messages out a little better if we kind of contemplated doing that, if that's what they wanted to, or, you know, recording the content and putting it freely available. Don't get me wrong, it'd be beautiful, but I'm aware that it's not a cheap event there. You know, it's a massive undertaking to run that. So, you know, we do need to keep that, you know, in content when we do start looking at how BETT runs. So, you know, I think that there's lots there that, you know, Vesta could look at to maybe expand the educational offer for us.
It was the first time this year we had our Thursday evening session that we could have different activities on. I'm not sure from a visitor perspective it was the most successful, but in terms of engagement, we had our silent disco with a DJ that certainly knew what he was doing, and I won't mention who you are, Mark. That really was a good way of just adding a different dimension and vibe to what we were trying to do on the stand. But around the show, I think what we saw was lots of different activities that brought people together. And yes, it is people first. Of course, we're there as businesses. Of course, we're there to give an opportunity to tell people what it is we've been working on, and hopefully at the appropriate time in their journeys, it will fit for their schools or multi-academy trusts or districts. But the best way you do that is to share, give experience, build relationships, and probably most importantly of all, the face-to-face, the spending time with people is about building trust as well. So for me, that's the kind of the real resounding part that we picked up on from the show.
About BETT, you know, there's, you know, you normally put out tips for when you go to BETT, you know, things to do, you know, make sure you put those flat walking shoes on, you know, make sure you get plenty of water. But what I would say is, you know, BETT is really, you know, it's a really great place for educators to get involved, but it's also very much what we make it. So, you know, if we as a society and as a group of educators who all attend BETT, you know, really want to push for it to be a more inclusive, more, you know, accessible place for us. You know, there's obviously ways that we can do that. BETT did a great thing. You know, you've got feedback of that. You know, you can get in touch and just say to them, well, actually this or that. And I think it's not just down to the edtech firms to make BETT. It's not just a selling place. You know, there's a lot going on in education for it, and that's down to us.
Ultimately, kind of our mission in 2023 is to bring BETT and our new events, some of which I've mentioned, there's new events and products together at full scale, and really create what really will be the biggest week for education, and bringing the global community across all sectors together under one roof. So naturally that means BETT back at full scale and offering solution discovery and content across the 6 zones of the show. That's the equipment and hardware, teaching and learning, management solutions, our global showcase, our BETT Futures and Ed Show zones as well. It's going to be amazing, and we're really excited to kind of really bring all of those events together.
So a massive thank you to Al and to Caroline, and of course to Eve for giving up their time to share those perspectives, and a host of hundreds of people in all those photos and videos that I included as overlays in there, including some people who are actually in the very next reports in Ollie's report, but I won't share who they are and all those different things, because I'm sure he'll be introducing them in just a few moments. But now it's time for my news for this month. My news for this month relates to an app. If you're a school which is using iPad, then this tool will be, it's not a brand new tool by any stretch, but it is a staple to many a teacher's classroom. And if you haven't updated it yet, please do get on your MDM portal and get the update pushed out. Not forgetting, of course, to try and provide some training for colleagues so they know how to use it before they get given it in the classrooms as well, obviously. But iMovie has had quite a hefty update, from storyboarding being added into some great new templates, new features, so forth and so on. It has really taken things up a notch in terms of the functionality there with inside iMovie on iPad. So please, 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 if you are a school using iPad, then have a good old look at what is on offer with the updated version of iMovie. It is simply superb. One other extra bonus bit of news that I'd like to share with you this month as well, though, apart from the fact that Elon Musk now is apparently like the owner of Twitter, but one of the things he's been pushing for, and something that I am, not that I'm trying to equate myself to Elon Musk as if, but something that's been on many people's products improvement request feature for a long time on Twitter has been the introduction of an edit button. Ollie, I know you are one for doing those typos on your tweets, as am I. And it's just so annoying that you can't just go back and edit it and you've got to do it all again and all of that. So looking forward to that coming onto the platform. I know it's going to be a very welcome feature for those who do use it, of which there are many, many tens of thousands of educators on that platform. So that's my little bit of news for this month. iMovie getting a big update and the edit function coming to Twitter. But now I'm going to hand over to Ollie, who's going to introduce his segments exploring network managers in education. Over to you, Ollie.
Thanks, Mark. And just a big shout out to both of you so far. Absolutely loved your two reports this evening on robotics and education and BETT 2022. And I cannot wait to attend BETT 2023 in a not too distant future. I'm sure that will roll by really quickly. My report this evening focuses on what I'd like to really call the unsung heroes of the education space, and that's the network managers, directors of IT, the network technicians, and so on, because without their support in the schools, we wouldn't really be able to do any of what we do, because no matter what we do in schools, pretty much everything relies on some form of technology in some way, shape or form. So it was my absolute pleasure to delve into conversation with three fantastic network managers. And I will publicly say this now, as I did on Twitter the other day. I found this report really difficult to make because they just shared so many amazing things. Everything they said was a learning journey for me. It was brilliant. So to cut my report down was a real challenge. I think I could have probably filled the whole Edtech show up with just this report. So that's a testament to the three guests that you will hear from now. So without further ado, here is my report into network managers. On my report for the Edtech show, I wanted to speak to the often unsung heroes across the education space, and that's the network managers or directors of IT, because not only do they help the day-to-day functionality across schools, but they're also the first line of defense in terms of cybersecurity and all things technologically related. And I think it's no secret that the rapid advancement in technology in recent years has led to their roles being ever more important in schools. So I'm keen to pick their brains about some of the tools that they can use, how they connect and collaborate across their own space within education, and then some of the challenges they face in supporting not only teaching and learning, but privacy of the data that we store in schools. Let's meet our guests.
Hello, my name is Gary Henderson. I am the Director of IT at Millfield School, a large independent school in Somerset. I am a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert. I also hold a number of kind of IT accreditations, particularly around IT security and risk assessment. And I have a particular interest and a particular focus on that kind of cybersecurity side of things. But also importantly in schools on the teaching and learning side of things. And prior to my existence as a director of IT, I was actually a computing and IT teacher for many years.
My name is Lee Mirza. I'm an IT transition manager by day. I've worked in the IT environment for over 16, 17 years. I've worked as a network manager for 3/4 of my working life. My role at the moment is basically transitioning schools to bigger, better technology and ensuring that transitional period happens quite smoothly and taking into account the type of technology that's been brought in.
Hi, I'm Dave Leonard. I'm the Strategic IT Director for the Watergrove Trust in the northwest of England, and I've been an IT professional for nearly 20 years now. I also present the Learning Dust podcast. Learning Dust is a podcast that I created, it came out of my Google Innovator project. I was lucky enough to be selected to the Google Innovator Academy in 2019. And Learning Dust was born because off the back of that, I was having a lot of conversations as an IT techie with teachers and school leaders who said that it's not really the standardized approach, the one that I take. It's not something that they see in every school. So I kind of started to question why that was. And I decided to set up the Learning Dust podcast to break down the barriers between technical staff in schools, school leaders, and teaching staff.
The DPO part of it's probably one of the toughest parts of IT, because obviously majority of data evolves around computers and systems and services. So I think there's quite a lot of areas in which that need to be considered. Me personally, when it comes to DPO, I worked as an ambassador for GDPR for a short period of time. So we did a lot of assessments based on existing setups. And that included paper-based stuff, it included technology, systems, services, and understanding where our vulnerabilities were. I think the most important part for us is understanding what's involved and educating the end user. I mean, most parts of data breaches or issues with GDPR tend to be around human error. So being able to educate people on that area is kind of pivotal.
The way I see it, so I bring the kind of some of the technical expertise regarding, what data we've got, where it's stored, how it's stored, what tools we've got for kind of looking at that data, for searching and recovering it. If for example, we're dealing with a subject access request, it is very much a kind of partnership. Obviously, one of the key things being that, director of IT or network manager can't really be the DPO, just basically because of that kind of conflict of interest situation that can exist. So it's very much about working together.
So I think it's really important to make sure that you're working as a team with your DPO, because no one person can understand everything from every perspective. So it's a team approach that both teachers, IT professionals, and whoever is unlucky enough to have been lumbered with a DPO role need to work together to ensure that we are maintaining legality, we are protecting data, and we are looking after the privacy and security of both the young people who use our networks and the networks themselves. So it's about that team approach for me.
That the role sort of very much differs from school to school based on the kind of context, the resources, the expectations, the technologies being used, etc.
I think the current state of IT is we don't want to be spending time firefighting. The biggest question really is, and what was a couple of years ago was, at the end of the day, people come into sites and whatnot, and you're fixing very low-level disruptions to a network. You have to come away from that now, and I think there's got to be proactive and preventative measures in place and tools to be able to do that. Technology is just as important as gas, water, electricity for a building. Without it, the school doesn't function. It's very difficult to function without it.
There's a few tools that are indispensable as IT managers. So things like Salamander is probably the best investment I make out of my annual budget each year, because that just buys us time, and that's the one thing that everybody in education is short of. So Salamander is what we use to provision our accounts with. It's a series of scripts that just run in the background. The guys who are behind it provided great support in setting us up. and generally it just works. They have new features that come out occasionally, and of course the systems that they interface with change periodically as well. So occasionally we have to call on support, and the support is one of the real strengths, I think. So Salamander is probably the first thing that I look to buy each year.
There's some relatively obvious ones. Office 365 for me has been absolutely key. Things like Power Automate and the ability to kind of automate tasks and make things a bit more streamlined, a bit more efficient. That is absolutely fantastic. I've recently found myself kind of playing around with Power Apps and creating little applications to solve specific issues in specific areas of the school and specific processes, which I think is fantastic.
Software tools and remote migrant tools like Zabbix is a typical example where it'll monitor different levels of switches and printers and devices and servers. There's so many tools out there, but it's finding and making sure that you can use those tools to be able to be proactive.
Classroom management solution. So we have different ones at different schools. So whether that's Senso, Impero, Net Support, those are the main players in that situation. But that's useful for many purposes. It's not just from our perspective as technicians, although it's invaluable for that to be able to see what's going on our network, but also from a teacher's perspective as well, particularly those who work in classrooms that have got a lot of IT, which is getting to be more and more now. They can use it for that classroom management and just to make sure that learners are on track.
Power BI, I think schools are sat on mammoth amounts of data, and Power BI allows us to start to kind of interrogate and explore that data and hopefully turn that data into meaningful information that the school leaders, etc., teachers can act upon. So Office 365 is probably one of the big tools for me.
We have services where they'll monitor stuff overnight for you. Should anything go down, service go down, you're notified about it. But I think that's more critical now than it's ever been before. Whereas people used to accept, okay, the network's gone down, right, we're going to have to do something, but going back to pen and paper, or we'll just do something else. That's not really viable anymore, because so much is reliant online than ever before. So you have to have proactive measures in place rather than reactive measures. And that's the kind of approach I always go with, because at the end of the day, having uptime is probably the most critical aspect of a teaching day.
From the MAP perspective and from the director of IT perspective, it's things like our help desk tools. So we use Freshdesk for our help desk, and in the past I've always been a little bit reluctant to get onto help desk tools because I found that I used to think that I'd spend more time servicing the help desk than it would servicing us. But having now taken on a role where I need to provide support across multiple establishments, it's invaluable to have that cloud-based approach. And that's something that we are looking to for lots and lots of services nowadays. If we can make things cloud first, then we will try to do so. But also tools such as Google's Data Studio is really useful for us to be able to present data in a visually informative but also engaging way.
Obviously, within the role, it's particularly busy, so you've got to have a way to kind of manage your time and manage task lists and whatever. And I like a particular little app, kind of Todoist for that. Some people I think would use Planner. There are other solutions, but Todoist is the one I go to. You have a lot of passwords, and therefore, kind of a password manager is kind of exceptionally important to kind of manage that situation. And I think, kind of linking back to things being busy, I think one of the critical things is having, good help desk software that allows, the kind of end users, whether it's, staff, students, to log tickets, log issues, etc. And the software allows you to kind of manage that, and also to get kind of useful data and analytics regarding how things are going, how many calls are being dealt with, how quickly they're dealt with, whether there's particular common issues that are arising within the school. I find that that kind of the combination there of the kind of help desk software and a bit of Power BI is fantastic, and actually being able to present information to kind of SLT regarding how things are going, and present them with kind of metrics, because I think that's possibly one of the things within the kind of IT services side of things, that IT services are quite often behind the curtain, behind the scenes, and not seen. And I think it's really, really important that we are seen in terms of all the work that goes in day in, day out. We're not just there when things go wrong trying to fix it. We're there day in, day out when things are working perfectly well.
We've got to work with teachers. I think the problems that I've seen in the past are when there's a disconnect between teaching staff and technical staff, because if you don't work as a team, then a teacher's going to bring something that may be a potential threat to the security of your systems or of your data. And through no fault of their own, they're just trying to do the best that they can from their learners. So often, if we can work in conjunction, it finds that happy medium ground. Similarly, if I come up with a solution, I come back from a conference and say, have you seen this wonderful new tool? I don't fully get the pedagogy. I understand bits about pedagogy, and I try to put myself in their tools and empathize with my teachers. But they're the ones who spend the time at the front of the class, and they're the ones who need to invest their precious time in learning new tools. So if something is easy to use, if it interfaces with products that we use already, and that satisfies the data protection requirements, then it's on to a winner. Those are the kind of the three holy grail goals for any new EdTech product, really. It's got to be simple, it's got to interface well with other products, and it's got to meet our legal requirements through GDPR.
One of the toughest ones, to be honest, because obviously there used to be talk about taking teaching and learning beyond the four walls of a classroom. People don't talk about that anymore. It's actually happening. You don't have to look at learning from home, teaching from home. And security is probably the biggest hurdle to overcome, because obviously you are taking data, you are taking information outside a normal working environment. But there's definitely tools and measures in place that you can take into consideration. Things like encryption devices, encrypting hard drives, two-step authentication, multi-factor authentication, just kind of ensures that those who are accessing information and data are the people that are meant to access it. And those small measures like that kind of help to ensure that no one's mis-accessing that information, or someone who's not supposed to has access to it. Even again, I suppose in training, if you are accessing resources on the web and stuff like that, just be included up in the kind of information that you're using. We're in an environment where a lot of the stuff is cloud-based. You are using third-party applications, so you can always do that on a basis where you can give people test accounts where they can go out and try stuff, really. And if it works for them, there's always a second opinion from technical managers or network managers that can say, do you know what, we've got to look at this product or this extension, and it seems fine. Most applications come with GDPR compliance policies, but at the end of the day, you just got to look at sometimes the back end of it to see where it's been hosted, what they're doing with your information, really. So yeah, definitely small areas that you can look into to ensure that you're still maintaining security, especially around teaching and learning, because people want to be able to see different things, try different things, but you don't want to stem it. You know what I'm saying? You just can't say, no, you can't use it because it's a security risk. So you've got to help them out and sometimes, you know, we will have a look at it. We'll see if we can find anything that's a fault.
Look, I keep coming back to in various things to balance, because I think in a lot of things, whether it's kind of teaching, learning versus privacy and security, whether it's filtering and monitoring, balance is important. On one hand, you could just say, right, teaching staff and support staff can install whatever they like, use any product they like, etc., etc., and that would, result in a huge amount of risks and potential liability further down the line. On the flip side of that argument, we could basically allow very little, and block everything, filter everything, only allow a very small set of software tools to be used, and that would reduce risk. but it would also reduce the kind of flexibility and the agility, which I think, you know, having been a teacher, you know, myself, I think within the classroom, that is really, really important. And it's possibly even more so in terms of the use of EdTech and educational technology. Some of the best uses I've seen have came out of somebody experimenting or trying something new and whatever. So the answer about maintaining the two is about, you know, finding that balance. It's I often describe kind of, you know, risk-based decision making and risk appetite, and that's what it's about. It's about, you know, establishing what your risk appetite is. You know, do you want to as a school be, you know, pushing the edges, you know, innovating, etc. And in which case you want more agility, you want more flexibility, and you will have to therefore accept a slightly greater level of risk. Or are you risk averse and therefore you want things tighter, you know, more locked down, more limiting, which means you don't have that flexibility, you don't have that agility, and it makes the innovation a bit more difficult. There isn't one answer. It's really for each school to kind of to look at the situation and decide, you know, where do we want to be on that continuum. Both extremes are too much. You can't just allow everything and you can't just block everything. The answer lies somewhere in between.
Research is a key part for us. We have our own contacts. I'm part of the British Computer Society, so we have forums and stuff. We can always ask questions.
Oh, I think, you know, it's important to be sharing, and I think that for me, the Association of Network Managers in Education is a brilliant, you know, resource. It basically is a free to join group, a free to join forum where network managers and directors of IT and people with a variety of other titles are sharing the challenges, the successes, the ideas, the thoughts. And I think for me, it's that state, you know, there's a phrase that, and I don't know who said it originally, you know, the smartest person in the room is the room. And the thing about the enemy from my point of view is it's a really big room of people with IT technical knowledge, with experience in education, schools, colleges, independent schools, international schools, all sharing those ideas and that knowledge freely. So that's my go-to place.
The key platform that I really use is the Association of Network Managers in Education, which is anme.co.uk. So I'm an ambassador for that program. It was set up in, I think it was 2014 by two guys, Rick Cowell and Ben Whitaker, who just really valued that collaborative approach between network managers. And it's grown and it's now covering different regions in the UK. And it's got regular meetings, it's got a portal. It's just a great resource for people to be able to share opinions, to be able to share problems and get advice from other people. But for me, quite often it's just about knowing that I'm not the only person that's going through the issue that I'm going through. Working in schools in certain roles can be quite a lonely experience, because although we've got colleagues working around us in different capacities, we tend to be the only network manager or the only IT director or sometimes the only IT technician. So I think it's really important to reach out laterally rather than just looking within your school for support, to be able to reach out laterally. And the ANME is the perfect platform for that.
So there we go. That comes to the end of my report, looking into some of the challenges that network managers, directors of IT technicians face. But something that came through really strongly from Z, Gary and Dave was that it's a problem for us all, and it's a problem that we can solve together. And connecting and collaborating both inside our school as IT technicians, teachers, students, is the problem that we can actually solve most of technological issues with. So it's working together and in unison. Please do reach out to Z, Gary, or to Dave, and as Rick, who is founder of the ANME. Thanks for joining us, Rick, and watching along. Great recommendations. They're willing to share and connect and collaborate with you. So please do reach out to them. Thank you so much, guys, for watching my report. We're going to move on now to my piece of news for this month in April 2022. And it's a little bit of news for Microsoft schools. It's very fast approaching the deadline for both MIE Expert applications as well as Showcase schools. Those applications open in May, so now is the time to start thinking about when you would like to submit your nominations, what you're going to include in your nominations, because they open on May the 15th and they close on July the 7th. So very quickly will those two dates roll around. So now is the time to start thinking about your nominations, whether that's on a personal level, a department level, or even a whole school or whole trust level. So please do start considering that. You can find more information on the Microsoft Educator Centre. Before we close the show tonight, though, just one final massive thank you, and that's to Dennis and the team at Easy Robot, who have sponsored this episode of the EdTech Show. You can find out more about Easy Robot by visiting this web address here, www.easy-robot.com. They have so many amazing solutions around robotics in education, as we saw in Ronan's report. So please do check them out. Thank you very much for sponsoring the show. See you again next month. The date for our show is the 26th of May. We look forward to sharing more EdTech stories with you then. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.